The panhandling conversation in Cranston and Rhode Island is a fascinating one.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, suggest that panhandling in and of itself is fascinating is perhaps kind of a question mark for you. But you know what? There's so much conversation in it when it comes to civil liberties, First Amendment, and then, you know, practical application of law. Throw in a little theology, and you got yourself an interesting mix. We have Professor Andrew Horwitz back here to discuss this. He's been active in this debate, and his perspective is always an interesting one. It is a pleasure to have you aboard. Thanks for joining me on what feels like a spring Monday. Yes, thank goodness. Let's go to the rundown and check out what is happening here. This is an indication that, guess what? Nobody, but nobody is immune to terror. Headline, St. Petersburg Metro. By the time you see this, of course, we record the show in the early afternoon. You probably have seen more developments, so I'm not going to burden you with the latest from the network on this, only to suggest that, again, nobody's immune, and you would think that this would give the Russians some cooperative pause. Not that loss of life is something that we ought to use as a lever ever, but I think you probably know what I mean. And then the other thing that's developing today in Washington, along, of course, with the president meeting with China's leader down at Mar-a-Lago and discussing things like, you know, small things like North Korea. This vote percolating as we were speaking. The committee from the Senate obviously will approve Judge Gorsuch. What happens with the Democrats, I still think at this point the Democrats are making a political mistake in not giving the president what is really a equitable position on the Supreme Court. The next fight's going to be the big fight. This just, you know, if this ends up being a nuclear option for the Republicans, it's just going to fuel this constant bemoaning of the public legitimately that we're so polarized in Washington that we just can't see each other's perspective ever. Maybe the professor has a thought on that too. He is a law guy, you know. Meanwhile, game day, yay! How about this? You know, Fenway, and they got a beautiful day to start. You know, we're only 2 weeks away from the marathon too. Of course, if you're watching at 7:30, you're getting ready for the big game tonight. If you're watching at midnight, maybe you caught the end of it. 2 number 1 seeds. You're with me on this one? There you go. The 2 number 1 seeds, and you'd say, oh, that's too bad. You know, we don't have an upset pick. Gonzaga is kind of a psychological upset pick as a number 1 seed, first ever there. North Carolina, been there, done that on a number of occasions. You know, the ratings for the NCAA tournament are through the roof with very little Cinderella here at the end. You know why? Because people like to see the big-time programs. It's proven. URI, doggone, almost got there. Think about that. Oregon got into this game with North Carolina in the Final Four and just got by URI. All right. You stuck on that headline? Do you just want to stare at those guys? Are you still with me? You don't like me anymore? They don't like me anymore. Why watch the fat, ugly guy on television when you can look at headlines for a while? And, of course, the last, the UConn loss is thrilling. Of course, the team that beat them ran out of gas last night for the women's championship, but this was a fascinating end to a 111-game win streak.
5 seconds. William looking for an upset for the ages. Blocked by William. Time to get a heave. Chong! No! A heave that did not go. And with it. 5 to get off a shot. William on the drive. Pull up, pull up. Got it! She got it! She got it!
She got it, and then she was benched for the 4th quarter in the championship game because she ran out of gas, and a fascinating drama. Gino Auriemma, nothing but class, I think, in suffering that loss, and something tells me the UConn women will be back with a vengeance. All right, a couple of headlines here on the main conversation. Citations issued to protesting homeless advocates at the Cranston intersection, including a couple of media people who were just trying to cover it, and more feedback on that. And here's a package that kind of summarizes the story.
Amidst of Monday's ride home, a few dozen activists coordinated through the state's Homeless Bill of Rights Defense Committee fill each corner of Saganasset Cross Road and New London Avenue.
I'm out here to exercise my First Amendment rights and to show my opposition to the ordinance.
Horwitz tells us he's dedicated his entire career to issues of social justice for those in need. He calls Cranston's recent roadway safety ordinance unconstitutional, a public guise to suppress the face of poverty and homelessness.
I was there for all of the hearings at the City Council, and that's plainly what this ordinance is designed to do, to try to remove from our vision poor people and people who are struggling, and I think it's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing.
Cranston Mayor Alan Fung couldn't make it to Monday's demonstration, but his office did say they continue to stress there is no ban on panhandling in Cranston. Instead, the ordinance passed in February restricts transactions in the roadway itself, but some say that's still too much.
I don't think that any ordinance that attempts to criminalize any behavior that individuals have to engage in to survive when we have such a broken safety net is ever going to be functional.
While the past ordinance, which is currently under review by the ACLU, points to public safety issues associated with panhandling, Smith tells us she doesn't believe that's the issue at hand. She says this is an attack on First Amendment rights, a way to criminalize the homeless and the poor.
If we're looking at what's dangerous, it's homelessness that's dangerous, not standing in a median and trying to survive.
So you were out there,
I was, in the rain.
and you got a ticket.
I did.
The right ticket, the
No,
wrong ticket?
I got the wrong ticket. I was issued a ticket for being a pedestrian crossing a freeway. Several problems with that. One, New London Avenue isn't a freeway. Two, the only time I crossed was in a crosswalk with the traffic light. I tried to persuade the officer who issued me the ticket that he should be issuing me a summons to the municipal court because I had spent the last hour handing literature through car windows, which is prohibited.
Which is the actual new offense, which is the sideways panhandling strategy.
Yes, and what's interesting and many people don't quite understand is it not only prohibits handing things into a car window, out of a car window, but also into a car window. So the person who is trying to be charitable, the person who hands money to a panhandler, has violated the ordinance.
Right. Couple of things. You have an advocacy position here, but you're also a really brilliant legal mind. So I'm gonna, and you're good at being able to step off the, partisan bias for some objectivity. Systemically, I think if anything is going to be written, it needs to be a statewide. I don't know that anything needs to be written. I'm still struggling with it. But when Cranston, gets their own ordinance for a specific intersection, it just moves the challenge somewhere else. And so
By design, I think.
Yeah,
I
get
think
out of
that's
my
the point.
town.
Exactly
Get
right.
out of my town. I really don't care what happens in Warwick.
I think that's the intent.
And I think the state legislature, and Charlene Lima, the state rep from Cranston, took my advice from that seat and put in an effort to create a state law, not too dissimilar to what they're looking at there. So if there's a legislative response to this, I think it's a statewide piece of legislation. I'm just not sure that a legislative response is really what's appropriate here. Thought on both of those things?
I guess let me take the first issue first, which is I'm quite clear that there is absolutely no need for a state response in this regard. There is a need for a statewide response in terms of our homeless problem. That statewide response needs to be doing a much, much better job than we presently do at the provision of affordable housing. We do a terrible job.
All right,
with
so you would
respect to
argue that there's no
affordable housing.
legislative response necessary?
No, we already have laws in place that prohibit obstructing traffic. We already have laws in place that prohibit standing in the middle of a roadway. These are the things that people claim are the safety aspect of this behavior. I was present at all of the hearings at the Cranston City Council. This is not a safety issue. The testimony from the people, the statements from the city councilors made it abundantly plain. This isn't about safety. This is about not wanting to see poor people panhandling. We'd rather not see it.
Well, I think the evidence of that is, if you ask yourself this question, if it was just about fire a person's boots for muscular dystrophy, if it was just about, I don't know, some Girl Scout cookies being available on the corner, If it was just about those things, would there be legislation, an ordinance in a city like Cranston, at Saconaset, be introduced? The answer to the question is obviously no.
Couldn't agree more.
So if that's the case, and those things now have to be prohibited in order to be able to accomplish the task, which is to bypass legitimate First Amendment arguments and create a traffic safety argument for the purpose of chasing out homeless with signs, panhandling, then you've got to ask yourself, are we on track here? And the answer is...
The answer is no, which is why I was out there on the median, intentionally violating an ordinance that I think violates my First Amendment rights. I think the Cranston City Council understood full well, after testimony from not only me, but a number of lawyers, including the former legal counsel to that council, that the ordinance is unconstitutional. They knew that it was unconstitutional, and they proceeded regardless.
Which is unconstitutional? The former attempt, or which was more addressed to the language of panhandlers, or this just? We're not talking about the panhandlers. We're just talking about transactional business in an intersection.
They're equally unconstitutional. I think the First Circuit case law makes that very, very clear.
However, there are other cities in the country that have been able to at least to hang on to some kind of intersectional disciplinary thing.
Not through recent challenges.
Jacksonville, others. Well, you know what? We can do the research on that. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
But the challenge and the problem is a difficult one to address. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the theological arguments here, which may impact the public policy discussion. Stay with us. So the bishop weighed in, Bishop Tobin, of course, weighed in on this. We have a headline here and a summary from Eyewitness News, which is an interesting setup for our next conversation.
Panhandling. It's a hot topic as of late.
I feel bad for people. I like to help people out.
I go back and forth on it.
Cranston passed a city ordinance forbidding people from standing in roads or medians to collect money. Warwick and Newport have considered similar mandates, and now Bishop Thomas Tobin is sharing his thoughts on social media in this post titled 3 Reasons Not to Give to Panhandlers.
It seems like, these are some more personal views as opposed to maybe views of the church. I'm not very religious, but I feel like, the church would want to help out those in need.
Tobin's first reason, throwing loose change at a panhandler while passing by, is demeaning and degrading.
Oh yeah, it definitely is demeaning to throw change at people. You know what I mean? Instead of just handing it to them.
His second reason, it can be a real safety hazard.
I don't exactly think it's a huge safety hazard if you're, stopped at a red light.
And the third, it enables a few dishonest people to prey upon the compassion of others.
I agree. It's a big scam. I mean, a lot of people, some people need it, but a lot of people, it's a hustle.
I don't think you should, stop showing compassion just because there's going to be a few, one-off cases where people are actually, scamming.
You made it again in there, by the way.
I did. That was me.
Bishop presents an interesting argument. I said on the radio last week that at least it gives people who run around with some good old-fashioned Catholic guilt a permission not to contribute to somebody in an intersection. I don't know that he's speaking directly to the ordinance itself. I think what he's saying is there's another way to approach this conversation. What are your thoughts?
I was stunned by that commentary. I view it as directly opposite or antagonistic to the words and the spirit of the Pope and what the Pope talks about in terms of what it means to be Christian, to be Catholic, to be generous. I think it's a very sad and ultimately sort of mean-spirited position for the bishop to be taking, and I find it very disheartening.
Yeah, here's the thing. What the bishop did, and he cites the Pope in this Facebook narrative, talking about the compassion and the relationship you should have with people when they're in need. He cites an excerpt of the Pope's perspective on all this. But it's almost as if they're talking about version A and version B. One is walking down the street and somebody's looking for money. The Pope is saying, listen, look them straight in the eye, touch them, and give them some money. So that you give them the dignity of a relationship, because the transaction is relationship-based. Driving by doesn't give you that logistical opportunity. I'm not so sure that the bishop and the pope aren't on the same page when it comes to a street panhandler that you might be encountering as a pedestrian. But this intersection thing presents a little bit of a challenge, and you got to admit that. I don't know that we need legislation or start ticketing people, but it presents a unique challenge.
It does. I think what people lose sight about when you connect it to First Amendment rights is part of what makes me proud of this country and proud as an American and proud as a lawyer is the First Amendment and the fact that we allow people to say things we don't want to hear, that we can tolerate messages we don't want to deal with, because that's part of what it means to live in a free society. And panhandling is First Amendment protected in a very similar vein. It is a right to stand there and ask for money. And why legislators can't see it in First Amendment terms, it boggles my mind.
So, this is an interesting dilemma. My perspective is that a public relations campaign, in addition to on-the-ground homeless work, see, I don't believe this population is infinite. I think that we can do better on the ground.
I agree.
Intervening with a dozen or so people that would be regularly hanging out at an intersection. It's exhaustive work, it's constant, but I think we can do it.
You're clearly correct, and I can give you examples of ways in which cities and towns have done it.
Do.
So Portland, Maine, which tried to enact the same mean-spirited and unconstitutional legislation that Cranston has enacted and got struck down by the First Circuit, now has a jobs program in place where they go out in the morning and the folks who are panhandling are told, if you want to work at minimum wage and clean up a park, hop in, we'll take you there, we'll get you set up. Albuquerque, New Mexico does the same thing. So those possible solutions are available. On a broader picture, national data has become quite compelling that the way to begin to really tackle homelessness is to take an approach called housing first, which is very different from what we've been doing for years and what we mostly continue to do here in Rhode Island, which is we ask people to try and resolve their problems first. Deal with your mental illness first, then we'll find you an apartment. Deal with your substance abuse problem first, then we'll find you an apartment. The data has now become overwhelming that you have to do it the opposite way, that stable housing has to be number one, and that once you get somebody into stable housing, then they're well positioned to start following through on the other pieces of the puzzle.
That makes sense to me. The other part of it, though, is some kind of a PR campaign that says, look, you're not helping anybody by exercising some kind of charity and or guilt action by stopping at an intersection and throwing some money at somebody. I think that part of the bishop's message is constructive in the sense that if the market stopped behaving in that particular way, then we wouldn't then they couldn't fall on an excuse that this is a public safety challenge. I don't think this is just a better intervention / reversive strategy, which I have no argument with, by the way. Don't you think? I mean, the people need to understand, for the most part, you're not really helping the case.
That seems to me to go at it from the wrong direction.
I think it should be a component of the conversation.
I would much rather see a world in which people aren't out there panhandling because there's no longer a need. I can tell you that, I mean, you hear the discussion about scammers
what I'm saying is maybe
they're not mutually exclusive.
Maybe there's no market of help. I mean, panhandlers aren't stupid people.
Right.
They just need help.
Right.
So if nobody's giving them any money, they're going to move somewhere else or decide to create another strategy.
Right. But my point is, I'd rather eliminate the need for them to be out there in the first place than
which is a
make
long
it ineffective.
strategy. I mean, which is a long strategy.
Yes.
And a short strategy ought to be stop throwing them money so we don't have these, I think, specious pieces of legislation that who's kidding who. I mean, so you and I are like 80% together. I mean, I'm insulted that a city council would go to the length at a mayor, who I consider to be a B player at best, who thinks he's kidding somebody, suggesting that the transactional ordinance is simply for safety and transactional prevention when we know exactly what the root cause of the problem is.
The disingenuousness is very offensive. And one of the things that happened at the city council is after the first couple of meetings when I and a number of others spoke to constitutional issues and public policy concerns, they changed the rules just for this legislation and said people who aren't from Cranston are not permitted to speak. Clearly, there was no interest in an actual dialogue, actual thoughtful process. It was disgraceful, really.
When we come back, Professor Horwitz is waiting on the marijuana legislation. We're going to take a peek at that because it's percolating. Stay with us.
All you need to do is look at cigarette sales in the state of Rhode Island and the enforcement of untaxed cigarettes. That is a black market that exists with a legal tobacco product.
The Attorney General has been actually peppering town councils all around the state with a paper that I don't think is exceptionally factually correct when it comes to some of the anti-marijuana efforts on his part. A little bit of shakeup at the State House may very well give a little momentum to the marijuana legislation here. You've advocated for the legalization of marijuana.
I have and continue to do so.
Because?
Because I think the evidence is overwhelming that our current policy, and the policy we've been trying for decades, is a complete and total failure. It does nothing to stop our youth from smoking marijuana. In fact, Rhode Island has one of the highest use rates among teens in the United States. And I was interested to just see the Attorney General talking about cigarettes. Cigarettes are an interesting example. We've made a tremendous amount of progress in reducing teen cigarette use. Not because we have a prohibition in place, although we do for teens as we would for teens with marijuana, but because we've done a great job educating youth. We do a disastrous job educating youth on marijuana. We try to tell our youth that marijuana is like heroin, like cocaine, like crack. Kids aren't stupid. They understand it's not true. They don't believe a word we say, for good reason, because we're not being honest with them. And we've completely failed. And the enforcement is incredibly racially discriminatory. It's done incredible amounts of damage in our poor communities, and in particular our communities of color. So those are my two sort of prime reasons, but I have lots of others.
Well, and it's important, I think, to point out, we only have a minute left here, you're not making the argument for people to smoke marijuana. You're making an argument that does what?
It's a public health issue, like alcohol is a public health issue. We've actually done pretty well with our youth in terms of alcohol education and reducing use. If you ask a teen what's the easiest thing to get your hands on in school, it's not cigarettes, it's not alcohol, it's marijuana. They all know kids who are dealing with marijuana. Let's take it out of the criminal justice system and deal with it as a health and safety issue.
It's going to get some traction.
I hope so.
The Massachusetts struggle is an interesting one. The people say yes, now the legislature's trying to figure out how to do it. And it's not going quickly. So
Right.
Rhode Island has an opportunity on an economic competitive level. I'm not sure I'm advocating, I'm just noting. It's going to be a fascinating couple of months, don't you think?
I do.
All right, stay on that ordinance thing. All right, nice to see you. And you going to pay your ticket, or are you
Absolutely not.
You're appealing. You're representing yourself?
Well, I don't have to appeal it. I haven't had my trial yet. But
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. The legislature and citizens of Warwick lost a good one this morning. State Senator Bill Walaska passed away. Here he was back in May of last year talking to us about equitable opportunities for cancer patients. Bill's experience with the disease was an honest one. He talked to us about it, and he lost his battle today. And we send our prayers to his friends and family. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.